Hi, welcome to the Science Museum. We are protesting the fact that Shell are sponsoring the most recent exhibition covering the climate emergency. They are a completely inappropriate sponsor, and the scientists, so many of us have been inspired by the museum, we feel completely betrayed. So yeah, that's why we're here. We've got the Dirty Scrubbers are here. They are highlighting the extent of greenwash here. Shell, they're really clear that they depend on a societal license to operate, and they do that in lots of ways, including sponsorship of like prestigious museums, like the Science Museum. And so we want Shell out of our museum. That's simple as that. So there are a number of scientists.
Again.
We've got a number of scientists outside the museum and also inside the museum, and we are trying to listen to we're trying to get through to the management who aren't listening to the public, and they aren't listening to even their own staff. Think that the museum should cut ties with the fossil fuel industry. So many scientists, even those that have contributed to the exhibition, just feel embarrassed. They feel like this is just totally inappropriate in a climate emergency. And the Science Museum could do so much more, right? Like what we need more than ever now, we need like an inspiring, vision of the future. We need someone to sort of inspire us to help us come up with a creative way forward, right? And the Science Museum could play a role in that, but instead they're taking money from such a ecocidal and corrupt company as Shell, right? The exhibition is about carbon capture and storage, and there is some carbon capture and storage could play a role, but Shell needs carbon capture and storage to become more popular and more well known, so that the public will allow them to carry on pumping oil.
How do you feel the Science Museum have let us down?
Sorry?
How do you feel the Science Museum have let us down?
They do so much. They put on so many amazing exhibitions and tell so many wonderful stories. We feel betrayed that they are partnering with Shell, who have such a clear vested interest in carbon capture and storage technologies. The management say that Shell could be part of the solution, but we strongly reject that idea. Shell, for example, in the Niger Delta over the last 20-30 years, Shell have been responsible for some of the worst oil spills in history, and despite legal action that's continuing to this day, they've completely avoided, or almost completely avoided, any cleanup operations. And of course that's because they are primarily responsible to their shareholders and not to the people of the Niger Delta, the Ogoni people. And so that situation is now playing out on a global scale. Shell are pumping enormous amounts of pollution into the atmosphere, and they say, oh, we'll tidy it up, we'll clean it up later. But like, why on earth will we expect them to do that?
Very good.
All of the dirty protesters up, clean up the oil. We're going to cover the whole building in greenwash. Don't you worry, the kids will never know. And it's lovely after 15 years of, just business as usual. It's absolutely fine. Don't worry, we're on it. We're absolutely fine.
Do you think we should give these lovely activist scientists who are trying to
let's pay them off
down for greenwashing?
I know, let's see if we can bribe them.
Some dirty money. No, you don't want Do you want some dirty money? You want to, are you sure about that? Are you sure about that? Fairy tale machines in there.
Oh no, you've been a bit foolish. Oh no. Just like when the kids were saying, here we go, look at that, let's clean you up with that
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Oh no, look at this state. You know what I think we should do? I think we should try to bribe these scientists.
Well, I'm trying to, but
to do a study about how ethical fossil fuels and all that can be, how ethical shells and ethics are.
You know that you can gasify. Oh, here come the rotters.
If I give you enough money, will you do a study that sort of says that Shell's investments are really ethical? And we've had this great idea for a solar-powered oil pump. What do you reckon? Can I empower you to do a bit of a study to back that up? How about if we give you even more money? We've got a really big pile of money over here. We've got so much money. We must have a prize. Everybody's got a prize. Go on, how about I just slip you that? Don't worry, nobody's watching. Little backhander. Just take that if you want. There we go. Oh, little cheeky backhander. There we go. Plenty more where that came from, darling.
Rip it up and start again. We've got more. We've got Bricktoe as well. Where are you going on holiday this year, love? Where are you going on holiday this year? Oh no, I'm going on safari to the Niger Delta. It's pristine. You've got to go while there's still some animals left. Magda. Where are you going on holiday this year, love?
Oh, I'm going to go to Antarctica.
Especially in the California.
Oh, yes, I've got a nice big bonus this year. This has been such a lucrative contract for us, hasn't it?
A lovely contract, because Shell didn't pay 200 million taxes last year.
No, what
risky, of course.
Where are you going to go on holiday then?
Well, I was thinking about the Maldives, you know,
The Maldives.
before they go under. Yeah. I've always
If you
wanted to
weren't
go there.
scrubbing, I'd say that you'd you should just stand up.
I should take a stand up.
So the shit is going up again. Sorry, there's a little bullshit anymore. Don't mind the loud and there's just a little bit of ambient bullshit, but it's okay, we'll clean it up. Don't mind the alarm.
You know about the social license? Social license. Let's fund a nice cultural institution and brainwash our children into thinking there's a solution anymore.
Oh, thank goodness that bullshit detector went off. That must mean that we cleaned it all up.
They did pay the tax.
I'm going to eat some penguins. I'm eating penguins tonight, darling, yeah.
Absolutely.
The oil versus the police, they're now just coming in to squeeze us.
We're just inside the exhibition hall with Future Planet, and as you can see, there's protesters with their banners, "Shell Out." Can you just tell me what you're doing here?
Yes, we're protesting because of this exhibition of Future Planet as Shell as a major sponsor, and we feel that this is them trying to seem legitimate when they're doing nothing to address the climate crisis and actually investing billions in fossil fuel instead of renewable sources. And the Science Museum should be educating our kids and really trying to face the emergency, and instead they're really happy to take Shell's money for that exhibition that should be all about really addressing the climate crisis.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So we're just inside the exhibition hall, walking through to the main exhibit that Shell have sponsored. Can you tell me what you're doing?
We're here to object to Shell sponsoring a climate change exhibition. It kind of beggars belief. I can't actually believe that they have the gall to sponsor this exhibition. It just feels like yet another bit of greenwashing by Shell, because they talk the talk, and yet they are continuing to invest massive amounts in new fossil fuel exploration, which is just can't be happening. That can't happen if we have any chance of a livable future for our children. And also Shell, as we all know, as they know, they're responsible for the climate change that's happening already and devastation of communities and habitats around the world. So we're just here making a bit of a fuss.
Great. Well done to the Gorilla Gang.
Hopefully drawing attention to this travesty, and hopefully the museum, Science Museum, will see sense and push Shell out. They're climate criminals. They don't belong in this institution.
Thank you very much for all you're doing today.
All right.
So I'm just going to show you a little bit around the exhibition. The whole thing is such a travesty. Then along here we've got, let's see what's going on here.
It is urgent that the Science Museum now does the right thing and cuts all of its ties to big oil. Thank you for listening.
Shell out! 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 Yes, that's fine.
Yeah. So that's why we want Shell to stop. We want them to stop digging for more fossil fuel and increasing the global warming.
Could I take a picture of that?
Absolutely. No, it sounds. Dear Science Museum, we all agree that we need rapid action to reduce our carbon emissions. You are telling us that corporations like Shell need to be part of the solution, but saying that they've got a 2050 net zero plan is, I'm afraid, not good enough. Both scientists and financial analysts are saying that Shell's action plan is not credible and certainly not aligned with the Paris Agreement. So you see, Shell is not part of the solution yet, but it's still very much part of the problem. By allowing Shell inside your museum, you are complicit in their deceit. So please, Science Museum, do not let Shell ruin your reputation forever.
I'm full of sadness for ecosystems and vulnerable communities, for the damage by this false sense of security from Shell, future promises, technologies. Science Museum reject Shell's sponsorship and ensure science is not used to perpetuate destruction.
Yeah, I know they're in the way. Excuse me.
Bad doesn't really cause those kinds of things. But sometimes you can get really bad air in the desert. So when the wind blows over the Sahara, a long time ago now, we had this kind of red mist in the air. My name is Pete Knapp and I'm an air quality scientist. I used to work at CERN on an antimatter experiment, and then I decided to research air quality once I discovered that around 1 in 5 people die from breathing air pollution from burning fossil fuels. That's around 8 million people a year, more than the number of hearts on this wall behind me that faces Parliament. Poor air quality is linked to COVID mortality too. I'm doing a PhD in air quality now because I want this to change. I love the Science Museum. Science is our ally in averting the worst effects of the climate and ecological crises, but this dirty deal with Shell is an insult to science. The National Theatre, the BFI, the South Bank Centre and the Natural History Museum have all cut ties with oil companies, yet the Science Museum trails behind. If anyone should stand up against Shell and its sickening anti-science propaganda, it should be the Science Museum. I feel betrayed. Not to burn anything indoors is a really good move.
Like on Christmas, when I think the 25th, also the burning.
Yeah. Well, this is our way of telling the museum that they should not be accepting money from Shell. So this exhibition is paid for in part by that fossil fuel company, Shell. And do you know why they would do that? Do you know why Shell would give money to the science museum? Say again?
I've decided to take action because I follow the science, which is telling us that we cannot wait any longer to do what needs to be done. And also, I want to be able to look into my niece's eyes, knowing that at least I've tried to do my part. As a scientist working in medical research, I've learned that the sooner you tackle a disease, the higher the chances to have a better outcome. I was 1 year old when Shell released this confidential report highlighting the role of the fossil fuel industry in driving global CO2 emissions and the potential catastrophic consequences of it. Since then, Shell has done nothing but spreading unscientific narratives so that they could continue to exploit lands, waters, and communities. And now, Shell is promoting unrealistic technological solutions to make us believe that it's serious in tackling climate change. But that's just another tactic to further delay the necessary measures. And it's really disturbing to see the Science Museum endorsing Shell's agenda instead of listening to the voices of the many scientists, activists, and young people who want to believe that our future planet could be way better than the one that Shell has in mind for us.
So what's happening?
Sorry?
What's happening? What are we seeing?
We're here because Shell is sponsoring the Science Museum's latest exhibit, which is about climate change and carbon capture. We think it's really important that this topic is actually discussed at Shell, so I think as far as we know, the Science Museum has kept editorial control over it, and there's a lot of good contributors to the exhibition. But the fact that it's being sponsored by Shell has just left a really bitter taste in our mouth. And the thing is that Shell are doing this for a reason. Okay? It's part of quite a long-running, very intricate, very well-researched PR campaign, which is designed to make them appear as though they are acting in the interest of society more so than they actually are. So if you look back at the history of what Shell has been doing, throughout the 90s and 2000s, even though their own scientists knew that climate change was real and it was a major issue and it was going to cause huge problems for future generations, they invested a ton of money into shadowy organisations, right-wing think tanks, what have you, that developed a whole load of arguments that are very effective at making people distrust the science and become sceptical about climate change. That's the thing, it's funding climate denial. Climate denial is a manufactured. It didn't really exist before the 1980s, and it wasn't polarised. You had people on the left and the right who both believed. And these groups realised that by putting together these particular arguments, that all the ones you sort of heard, you drive the car, how can you trust it? Focusing on individuals and their behaviour as opposed to the right system. Digging into details of data and cherry picking it in order to focus on small details to make it seem as though climate change is happening, but actually distorting the data of doing that. Behind things like hacking of emails to climate scientists and then going after climate scientists, often sending them death threats and things like that. As a result of this is that it's been... Sorry, were you giving me this? Yeah, okay. The end result has been to cause a whole load of distrust about the science that we really are quite sure. I think it's behind why the Republican Party in America is full of climate deniers, why in Russia they left the nuclear theatre went to school, why in Copenhagen
fails. Closer to me. Okay, sorry. Thank you. Is that better? Yeah. They are part of a much wider network which has deliberately undermined the science for decades. Yes. And I think we think it's inappropriate for an institution like the Science Museum, whose main purpose is to educate the public about science, should not be getting sponsorship from a company which we know has put a huge amount of money into spreading disinformation about science. It's really problematic. In all fairness, Shell actually don't put as much money into that kind of explicit climate denial now, but that's in huge part because there has been such a backlash against it, and people have done a huge amount of research into it and have been calling them out. The problem is that by doing all that work in the 90s and 2000s, it meant that we missed the opportune moment to deal with this crisis. If we were going to do like small incremental changes to reduce CO2 emissions, we needed to start in the 2000s. And it's due to the work of companies like Shell and ExxonMobil and what have you, that we missed those golden years, that we could have done something about this. And it means that now, if we are going to keep to the target set in the Paris Agreement, which there's really good science to say that we really need to do that if we want to avoid the most catastrophic impacts of climate change, we need really radical, drastic action. And what's happening now is that Shell are outwardly saying that they agree with the science. We've got our net zero plans, what have you. But they are still avoiding that difficult, messy question of, are we going to cut emissions in the next 10 years? Which is absolutely what we have to do if we want to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. What they're doing instead is saying, it's okay, we're putting forward this net zero plan, we're going to get to net zero by the mid-century, and we're going to grow loads of forests, we're going to build carbon capture with growing forests, burning those wood and then burying it underground in order to offset the emissions that we can't get rid of now. And so what they're doing is that they are shifting their portfolio, they are reducing their oil but expanding the amount of gas that they produce. By 2030, they're not really planning on reducing their emissions by any significant amount, when we know that if we want to keep the Paris Agreement, we need to roughly halve emissions by 2030. So they're not doing anything on track with what is needed for the Paris Agreement. Instead, they're assuming that we'll be able to suck carbon out of the atmosphere at huge quantities from around 2050 onwards. But the problem is that their net zero report has actually been torn apart by a whole load of scientists specifically for assuming that we'll be able to draw carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere at much larger quantities than we think we're possible to. So it's just not credible, what they're saying. There's been some very recent peer-reviewed research which has dug into their net zero plans and has shown this. So if we can't rely on, we probably will need to draw some carbon out of the atmosphere we've already emitted too much, unfortunately, so we need some degree of drawing carbon out of the atmosphere. Ideally, we'd like to do as much of that as possible through restoring nature and by restoring the health of the oceans and the soils. But there are limits to that. There's only so much land on the planet, and we need some of that land to live on. We need land for agriculture. If you're talking about what they're saying is like growing a forest the size of Brazil, and every year just cutting those forests down and burning it and burying the carbon dioxide in the ground, that's a huge amount of land. That's going to come across there's food security issues, water issues, land rights issues. Be driving indigenous peoples out of their territory, and it's also terrible for biodiversity because what you're talking about is growing monocultures of trees, which have no real diversity. It's not, a forest with all one type of tree is not really a forest. It's a farm. Okay.
So one final question. By supporting Shell, are the Science Museum effectively taking part in their cover-up?
So, I think they are lending their own credibility to Shell, and I think that's a really dangerous matter. From what we can tell, I think the actual exhibit itself is probably pretty good. I would actually like to see it. I think what's in there is a really important conversation that people should be having. But the problem is that Shell's plans have been torn apart precisely because they're not credible in regards to the stuff that is in the exhibit. And so by putting their name to it, they're trying to be like, oh no, you can trust us, we are supporting this science, we are part of that. And actually, no, what they have done is not in line with the kind of science which is being put in the exhibit.
Yeah.
And so what's happening is that Shell are gaining credibility from the Science Museum's name in doing so. And that comes at the cost of the Science Museum's credibility. And I think that's a real shame because this is such an important conversation. We should be having it. But if you want to have that kind of conversation, it needs to be free of influences that have vested interest in it. It needs to be independent.
Thank you very much.
That's a shame. Thank you
very much. Over to you, Vlad.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Hi, I'm Aaron. I'm an ecologist who used to study climate change on the front lines in the Arctic. And I just want to say how inspired I've been by the youth strikes and by Extinction Rebellion. Just ordinary people, school children, teachers, doctors and nurses, plumbers and gardeners, who've really listened to the warnings that we scientists have been putting out about the scale and the urgency of the crisis, and have acted in response to that, proportionally to that, so that they've taken action on the streets and risked arrest in order to try and bring about a better future. And it's not because we don't know enough, and it's not because we need more research that we're not taking enough action on this. It's because of the power of vested interests, fossil fuel companies like Shell, who've used PR and spin to mislead the public and to lobby governments to delay taking action. And that's what they're doing here with the exhibit in the Science Museum. They're using their sponsorship in order to greenwash their image, in order to seem as though that they're part of the solution when they're still funding efforts to try and delay action. And it's just not acceptable. And it's not acceptable that the Science Museum are taking this money. So I think it's time that we scientists stand up alongside everybody else who's listened to our warnings and act in accordance with our findings. And so, reluctantly, yes, but necessarily so, I'm going to be taking action today at the Science Museum. I hope you will all join me. Thank you.
The one with the
boys in uniform.
Free money.
Free money, dirty boys.
Oh! What's the police? All that tax.
Piggy.
What the police? If we
Elon Musk. I want a first class seat on the way to Mars. Will you stop talking about that Duracell jive buddy, please? Duracell jive buddy? Oh, Elon. Very happy on Mars. Oh, that's all I can say. He's a bit socially, Oh, I tell you what, he's got a very nice spaceship. He's playing havoc with my Jaguar Land Rover strategy. Elon Musk, you mean? Elon Musk, yeah.
A lot of satellites.
We could get first class tickets the way we're going with all this greenwashing. One way. That bulge curve on the greenwash, they're just like the amount of money they're investing in oil. It's just amazing. I'm gonna get all of the dollars, everybody.
Originally, a lapsed botanist.
One of these days,
Yeah, well,
I am a scientist, and ordinarily I love discovering more about the world around us. I would never have thought of myself as an activist or a rule breaker, but in recent years I've not been able to ignore the huge amount of scientific evidence that is telling us we need to take urgent and unprecedented action to save our planet and ultimately to save ourselves. We likely just have a few years in which we all need to work together to avoid the collapse of ecosystems and societies. Organisations that present an image that they are working towards this goal whilst continuing their environmental destruction are causing immense harm. They are obscuring the truth and they are delaying necessary climate action. I am trying to stand up for our future planet by standing against those who threaten it the most.
Hot.
Yay!
Bombshell.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jen and I'm a data science researcher. I love science and I love the Science Museum. I came here as a child and I've brought my own children here. We come to the museum to hear stories, to learn about science and innovation and to be inspired. Stories are how we as humans influence and teach and inspire. We're in a climate and ecological emergency, so it matters who gets to tell the story. When you let Shell sponsor an exhibition like this, you allow them to co-opt the story of scientists and climate experts who've contributed and make them their own. You allow the visitors to the museum to leave believing that Shell are a benevolent benefactor in the story of the climate emergency. But Shell aren't. They aren't interested in finding solutions. Shell are not looking to take the radical steps needed to limit global heating. Their model is one of extractivism and profit, of exploitation and of green smoke and mirrors. They are the problem, not the solution. And their sponsorship of this museum is an insult to the future of every child who walks through those doors to learn, maybe for the first time, about the amazing things that we can achieve as humans through science.
I'm happy to. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Royal Dutch Shell, I'm very pleased to welcome you to the Shell-sponsored, what do we call it? Well, it's not really an exhibition. It's more of a getting our message over, shall we? Right, I have been asked by the Royal Dutch Shell Board of Directors to reassure all of our customers and all of the people attending this exhibition that we always care for the planet. We are very pleased that the Science Museum has accepted our very generous offer of sponsorship.
Greenwash!
In order to reassure you, I have brought with me 3 statements. Let the ladies through, please. Ladies, come on through. Come on through. I have brought with me 3 statements that have been...
Slowly clean up this greenwash!
No need for this. No, there's no need. No, there is... Oh, did I? Okay. Well, you've got to do your job, I quite understand.
I'm only doing my job.
Come on through, come on through.
Somebody's got to make a living, I've got mouths to
Come on,
feed.
can you move along, please? I've got an important statement to make here on behalf of Royal Dutch Shell. Stop it, please. I had this done before I left the office. All right. So, what we're going to do is I'm going to give you the 3 statements, and those statements they have been published, and they are true facts from Shell. So, listen carefully. Recently, we published, let's help keep the skies blue. We all need clean air for future generations who want to live and play under clearer blue skies.
Greenwash!
Would you like to reply? I'm sure you appreciate that's true.
Greenwash busters! Greenwash busters!
Who are we going to call?
Greenwash busters!
So, under our clear blue skies with pollution from fossil fuels, of which Shell is a great contributor, 1 in 5 of us will die from air pollution globally. That is the latest research. Shell knew they had a problem back in 1984, and what did they do? Did they clean up their act? Did they move to stop fossil fuels? No! They employed whole companies to spread misinformation about fossil fuels. When they messed up the Niger Delta, in which 1 million Ogoni people live, did they clean up the oil encrusted fields? No, they left it to the Ogoni with buckets to clean it, buckets and brooms, to clean up their eco-spaces. That's your answer to the clear blue sky.
Oh wow! Moving swiftly on, if I can come to my second point, I'm sure this will reassure you. We, very simply, shall invest our profits in tomorrow's solutions.
Rubbish! Greenwash!
Who are we going to call?
Greenwash busters!
Who are we going to call?
Greenwash busters!
Who are we going to call?
Greenwash busters!
That is a quote from an advert which actually the Advertising Standards Agency banned subsequently, because their tomorrow's solutions include big investment in tar sands in Canada, one of the worst CO2 emitters in the whole world, and they also have invested in the USA's largest oil refinery. So that is not tomorrow's solution. That is increasing the problem. So we have more and more problems for our grandchildren.
Well, I'm very pleased to hear all the different views. Some of them not quite accurate. You need to listen to what Charlotte's saying. We're a huge company, and we have your interests at heart. Anyway, finally, let me reassure you with this recent statement. Shell's target is to become a net zero emissions energy business by 2050. Instead, with society's progress in achieving the goal of the UN Paris Agreement on climate change.
Yeah, well, all I can say to that is your typical sneakily, carefully worded
greenwash. Shell actually refused to be a signatory of the Paris Agreement. They have no plans to reduce their oil and gas production by 2030. And by 2030 is when the IPCC says fossil fuel needs to be substantially reduced. Just 2 days ago, the International Energy Agency said there must be no new oil and gas exploration, and that is starting now. But if you follow the money and you don't listen to Shell's greenwash lies, Shell plans to invest billions of pounds to develop 35 new massive oil and gas plants by 2025. That will make it impossible for us to address the climate change problems. So the truth is that Shell plans to increase their emissions by 2030, not cut them. Don't believe Shell's greenwash. The future of our planet has to be fossil fuel free. Greenwash busters! Greenwash busters! Greenwash busters!
Shell cares for everybody on the planet. You have to remember that. Keep on buying your fossil fuels. You need them.
We do!
Enjoy the exhibition, everybody.
Hello everybody and welcome. If you're just joining us, we are reporting live from the Science Museum in South Kensington in London, where today is the opening of the Futures Planet exhibition all about climate change, which is absolutely fantastic, and we really welcome and thank the Science Museum for actually hosting this very important exhibition. But we're not very happy with the fact that the sponsors of this exhibition is Shell, which is one of the largest contributors to global carbon emissions in the world. And for the last 30, 40 years have been giving us misinformation about what's actually been happening about the ecological and climate emergency, to the extent where it's turning into a form of greenwashing. And so much so, I'm now, I've got scientists, there's 7 scientists here who are locked on physically to the exhibition because they are so disgusted by the fact that Shell Oil is promoting an exhibition about dealing with climate change. It's absolutely shocking. You couldn't make this up, really. And what we've seen in all the years going by is this misinformation that's been happening. The public are not being told the truth, and you get people now coming to the Science Museum and they see Shell Oil all over it, and they're talking about these wonderful things like climate capture and storage, and we get to see these wonderful machines that are going to suck vast amount of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and save humanity. It's unproven technology, unproven at scale, it's expensive, and we're playing dice with the future of humanity, and this is what we're up against. It's the worst form of greenwashing. We've got more machines here, the direct air capture behind us, more wonderful machines that are designed to keep oil and gas companies keep on extracting hydrocarbons from the ground so they can keep putting it into the atmosphere, and they can say, well, what we're going to do is we're actually going to suck the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere using these machines, and we're all going to be saved, right? So this is what we're up against here. I'm just going to go and have a quick chat with this young man here. This is Extinction Rebellion Live. So what's your name?
I'm Dr. Aaron Thierry.
Dr. Aaron, and you're locked on.
Yeah, I'm locked on here.
So we've got Dr. Aaron Thierry, who's actually physically locked on, and you're a scientist, an ecologist.
I've got a PhD in ecology. Yeah.
And I believe you actually were working in the Arctic.
That's right. I worked in the Arctic up in Canada, and I was studying the effects that climate change is having on ecosystems up there, how much disruption we're seeing already. So climate change is happening about 2 or 3 times faster in the Arctic than it is in other parts of the world. Mm-hmm. And as a consequence, we're seeing really rapid deterioration in the environment up there, really rapid changes to ecosystems as they're responding to unprecedented temperatures. And so we're seeing wildfires becoming far more common, far larger. And that's having all sorts of other impacts then on ecosystems, because it causes the permafrost underneath the forest to thaw out, which then can lead to bacteria breaking down the soil, and that causes more methane and CO2 emissions. And also the soot from the wildfires gets blown onto ice sheets like in Greenland, and that then darkens the color of the ice sheets, and that can lead them to start melting faster.
So all these things you're talking about, like they all sound really, really scary, right?
Yeah, really scary.
Right. And to a layperson like me, I'm not scientifically trained, but I just hear about what's happening in climate change, and I'm terrified. I don't understand the science. You, as an ecologist, right, who's worked in these places, you understand it so much that you're probably risking your career from coming in here and locking on. Like this is like kind of unbelievable, the action that you're doing.
Thanks. I think, you know, scientists have been putting out warnings about what's happening for years. You know, if you read any of the major reports that, say, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change put out, so there one in 2018, they've got another one coming out this year. If you read those reports, it's really clear just how much of a problem that we have, right? That we really are in a crisis now. And that's because we've delayed taking action for so long. We've continued to ignore the warnings that scientists have been putting out. And I think one of the reasons that people have, you know, that we have ignored them, or that we have had this delay, is because companies like Shell, who are sponsoring the exhibit that we're at today, have basically funded denial campaigns, misinformation campaigns, to put talking heads onto the news, and to write op-eds in the newspapers saying that climate change isn't happening, or isn't serious, or isn't nothing to worry about, or is too expensive to tackle. You know, all of those talking points, and yet, you know, they're just basically doing that in order for these companies to keep making more and more money and destroying the planet.
And keep more. And the thing is Shell are actually developing new oil and gas fields, and they're actually they say they're going green. Well, for every $1 they spend on renewable technology, they're spending $23 on oil and gas extraction.
Right.
So it's the worst form of greenwashing. It's criminal.
There's an amazing example of that with Exxon, where you know, if you look at their total spend on advertising about their kind of alternative biofuels, compared to how much money they were actually investing in the alternative biofuels, the advertising dwarfed what they were actually investing. You know, and that was still a tiny fraction of what they're investing in developing more oil.
And this stuff here, this is DAX, this is direct air capture technology, and something I do know. I work in renewables, and this terrifies me because I understand the business model, and the business model doesn't stack up, because it's going to cost us, like, you know, tens of trillions to suck out carbon in the future to save what we're doing now, so we can keep on flying.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things to say there. I mean, there are certain things that we can't decarbonize at the moment, and I think we will probably need lots of these technologies in some ways to take CO2 out of the atmosphere, because we've already put too much in, right? But at the same time, I think you're totally right. I think there's a narrative being spun along here, which is saying, you know, we can carry on emitting fossil fuels now, because it's okay. In the future, we'll use machines like this to take it back out again, as though that's going to solve the problem, and as though
it's like a comfort blanket.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. I think there was a kind of a line that said, you know, burn now, pay later, right? You know, and that's exactly what Shell's strategy is, and they've just been called up on it by their investors and by a lot of financial analysts, saying, you know, your plans do not align with the Planet Paris Climate Treaty, which is again another reason why on earth is this museum, you know, legitimizing Shell as a legitimate corporate partner, when we recognize that they're not even doing the bare minimum that they need to do to solve the crisis.
But we do want, you know, so we do want the public to know about climate change. So it is great that they're actually having this exhibition, but it's terrible who's sponsoring.
I think it completely undermines the message of the exhibit. You know, you've got the workers and the curators who've done so much work putting this exhibit on, and that, you know, it's good science that's here, but it's kind of tainted by the fact that it's sponsored by Shell. I mean, how can the public take it seriously, knowing that there is this connection? You know, it puts suspicion there where there shouldn't have to be any. And I think the museum really has to think really carefully about what is the message it's putting out there by associating itself with these companies.
Absolutely. Any last word before I go and talk to more of your colleagues?
I think I'd just really like to say that, you know, for me, the reason I'm here is because, you know, I believe in what this institution stands for as the Science Museum.
Yeah.
I came here as a child and was inspired by it. And yet, I think, they've really lost their way here. I think they really need to look at, who it is that they're partnering with and think about, all of the young children that are coming through the doors of this museum today and the future that, that they're creating for them by allowing Shell to keep having its social license.
Yeah, no, very good, very good. Thank you very much, Dr. Terry. Keep up the good work. All right. So yeah, some very, very powerful words there by doctors actually working in the field, knows exactly what he's talking to. We've got some more people here locked on. Just going to have a quick word here with I think it's Ben. Is it Ben?
Yes, that's right.
Ben, how you doing? So just look at the camera this way.
Oh right, yeah.
I'm just talking normally. So you're what kind of scientist are you?
So I'm a geologist.
Geologist. So you look at rocks.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, and what has motivated you to come in and to lock yourself on? You can see this. You look at this big, huge D-lock, and you've locked yourself on. What has motivated you to come and do this?
Well, as we know with the IPC 1.5 degree report, we're running out of time.
Yeah.
And we need immediate drops in carbon emissions.
Yeah.
And the trouble here is Shell is sponsoring this exhibit, but Shell's operations are not compatible with the 1.5 plan. So
and you know that because you crunch numbers and you're an expert in microorganisms or micro.
Well, no, it's not in my field per se, but I've read the IPC, I've read the various scientific reports, and it's something I feel strongly about.
Yeah.
And because Shell aren't aligned, so the museum is actually giving the impression that Shell is interested in solving the problem, whereas we know they seem to be more interested in carrying on business as usual.
Right.
And leaving the problems for someone else to sort out. But yeah, I mean, coming back to the 1.5 degrees, we know that above that, all the coral reefs die out. There's going to be huge human suffering, ecological suffering, and it's just so important that we act now rather than have these smoke screens.
Right, amazing. Ben, well, thank you very much for doing this brave action. Anything else to add before I go and talk to more of your colleagues?
No, thank you for speaking.
Okay, keep up the good work. So that was Ben. So we got spare me one moment. Earphones. Yeah. So we've got several more scientists to interview. So I've just heard that we've got Dr. Emily Grossman for a interview, and Dr. Grossman has been at the front line of calling out companies and talking about climate science for the last several years, and has been very vocal about it, and is an expert in the field. So I'm just going to see if we can connect. Hello there. Hi, how are you doing?
Hi there. Hi. Nice to see you.
So tell me, what do you think about Shell sponsoring this new exhibition here in the Science Museum?
Yeah, I'm finding this whole thing really moving, actually. I've been tuning into the live stream for the last hour or so and seeing scientists locked on, scientists from our Scientists for Extinction Rebellion community locked on to the exhibit inside one of our great institutions of this country, somewhere that all of us who are scientists and many others went to as children to get inspired, to feel that there was all this wonder and all this magic in the world that we could explore through using science, through understanding the world. And then there's an exhibition taking place which is about the future of our planet, which is great content. You know, it's been contributed to by school children, by climate strikers, school youth climate strikers, by lots of top scientists in terms of the content itself. But to see that it's being sponsored by Shell, as such, it's being effectively the hypocrisy of creating an exhibit that actually says brilliant and important things that we need to know in order to save the planet and save the people on it from like catapulting ourselves as we are at the moment towards absolute catastrophe, towards devastation, loss of life, loss of land, loss of animal species, loss of homes, not enough food, not enough water to drink. That's where we're heading towards. And to see this exhibition, which is really welcome in terms of the future of where we're going and what we need to do about it, but to see it being sponsored by Shell, one of the organisations that's spent the last 30 years funding the corruption of science, funding misinformation, spending $1 billion of shareholders' money, funding climate think tanks who are basically delaying action, who are spreading misinformation. It's like going to an exhibit for like treatments for lung cancer that's being sponsored by a tobacco company. I mean, it's just such lunacy. And for the Science Museum to be doing this, I feel personally really betrayed by this. You know, I feel really moved by watching the scientists, the really brave scientists on the ground who've locked themselves to the exhibits. Scientists don't generally make good activists. You know, scientists, we're supposed to be there impartially. It's up to the governments, it's up to the media. Seriously, scientists have been trained, most of us, to not, you know, speak out emotionally, to not take action ourselves, to just, if we say the truth and we say it very calmly, then people will act on that. And the fact is, people haven't been acting on that. The governments haven't been acting on that. The media, to a large extent, hasn't been reporting on it, more so recently, thankfully. And so actually, to see scientists moved and compelled to take such radical action, to put their careers at risk, to put their health at risk to some extent, to be locked on to an exhibit in the very institution that inspired us all is I think a really, really, really moving and important event that's taking place here today.
It is, as you said, it is so powerful, and I've spoken to the scientists here. I've just interviewed 2 of them. I've got like 5 more to talk to, and it really is. It's people who know. It's like being you know, you're at a movie and you've got the kind of one scientist in the room saying everybody in humanity needs to do this, and everybody else just totally ignores them. Except what we've got is we've got tens of thousands of scientists and peer-reviewed papers, everybody's screaming, and now we've got these brave people locking on here, and as you just said, even like jeopardizing their careers and screaming to raise the alarm. And what do you feel just when you hear that Shell, you know, has been greenwashing us for years, and they're actually now talking about like more expansion of more hydrocarbon fields, and they're going to be using this kind of direct.
It's completely insane. I mean, they're actually lying to us. They're saying, oh, we're going to go net zero. Oh, we've got all these plans. But their plans have been torn apart by scientists. They've been torn apart by financial analysts. The International Energy Agency announced just yesterday that if we're to get to net zero, if we're to stay below 1.5 degrees of heating, which is what is absolutely internationally agreed, we have to stay below to prevent the absolute worst of the climate and ecological crisis. And let's not beat around the bush. We're already seeing a huge amount of devastation because of climate change and because of wildlife loss. But if we're to avoid the absolute worst, we have to stay below 1.5 degrees heating. We're currently on about 1.1 degrees heating, and we're heading for 1.5 degrees around 2030 at this rate. And if we're to stay below, we have to stop carbon emissions right now. We have to halve our emissions by 2030. And the International Energy Agency has said that means no exploration of new oil and gas from the end of 2021, from the end of this year. But yet Shell are saying, oh yeah, we're going net zero, but they're not. Their plans include a 50% expansion of gas, drilling for new gas, expanding new gas projects. Their plans include a whole load of other greenwashing where they're saying that their 10-year plan is going to get us there, but it's absolutely not. And what they are doing is saying, oh yeah, in the future, we're going to remove all those excess carbon emissions using nature-based solutions like planting forests. But they're talking forests the size of the whole of Great Britain to be mature in 10 years. I mean, that is just not feasible without huge damage to the rest of the planet and loss of land plan that we need for food. And they're also saying we're going to take all the carbon out of the atmosphere in the future by carbon capture and storage. And this is just a lie. I mean, yes, the fantastic exhibition that you're seeing at the Science Museum is showing us the future in terms of what's possible with carbon capture and storage. But the levels at which Shell are saying that we're going to need that in order to offset Shell's projects and Shell's future emissions, the levels that are needed in terms of carbon capture and storage are just not feasible. They're not safe, they're hugely costly, and it's absolutely not, and no scientist would say that this is going to be possible in the future. So they're hiding behind this smokescreen of saying we're going to plant all these trees, we're going to suck in all our emissions, we're going to leave it to the future generations to clean up our mess. Shell are absolutely known for not cleaning up their mess. They have devastating damage to 1 million people in the Niger Delta in Nigeria and the Ogoni people. And they have, despite ongoing legal action due to their own oil spills of absolute mess in that region, despite ongoing legal action, Shell have not cleaned up. They've not taken responsibility for what they're doing. They've been subject to countless accusations of appalling abuses of human rights. They're even accused of being complicit in the murders of 9 climate activists from the Ogoni people in that region. For 30 years, they've been funding misinformation and corruption of science. They're not taking action now, and they're not taking responsibility for the mess that they are causing across the globe. So I just think it's absolutely heartbreaking to see that the science, I really passionately, and it's really been part of my life and what inspired me to become a scientist, to kind of like taking donations or sponsorship from Shell in order for Shell to kind of have this greenwashing, this smoke screen. They have to have a social license, so they have to get sponsorship from big exhibitions, and they're doing this at the expense of the reputation and the credibility and the integrity of the Science Museum. We've already seen other big institutions like the National Theatre, the BFI, the South Bank, they've all cut their links with big oil, with oil fossil fuel companies. The Natural History Museum is going a really good step as well. They've got advocates, planetary advocates, who's they aim to inspire people from their exhibitions to take a stand against the planet. And they've also started to cut a lot of their big oil connections. They're not quite fully done yet. But to see the Science Museum lagging behind and not leading the way on this crucial issue, and having kids coming to this exhibition thinking, oh yeah, Shell's part of the future, when Shell is not part of the future. Financial analysts and scientists are absolutely clear that Shell always has been and still is very much a part of the problem.
So what is the ask? So what are scientists? What are the Extinction Rebellion scientists? What are you asking for? What are you saying to the Science Museum? What is the actual ask?
Yeah,
is what?
Yeah, good question.
Totally stop any sponsorship.
Yeah. So let me just be clear that the scientists.
Yeah.
The Scientists for Extinction Rebellion community have already tried other methods to get the Science Museum Group to divest from their sponsorship from Shell and other big oil. So we wrote a letter to Sir Ian Blatchford, the director of the Science Museum Group, that was published in The Ecologist in May, which asked for him to meet with us, which asked for him to tell the truth about how Shell are part of the problem, and to ask for the Science Museum Group to act now by cutting their links with Shell and with big oil. So we did get a response from Sir Ian Blatchford, and he did say that he had acknowledged our letter. He then went on to tell us about how the Science Museum themselves are going to net zero and are going fossil fuel free to reduce their fossil fuel emissions, which is fantastic. But he didn't address anything to do with the fact that we're saying, well, but you're accepting sponsorship and funding from an organisation that is hugely part of the problem and has corrupted science. And he didn't address that, and he didn't agree to meet with us or suggest anything around that. So that's why we've been compelled now to take action. Whose work is in the exhibition, like boycotting the exhibition, because they feel betrayed by the fact their work's being used in an exhibition they didn't know would be sponsored by Shell. And one of the scientists whose work is in the exhibition, she's actually come out and said that she's very embarrassed that her work is in the exhibition, and that she doesn't want her name to be associated with Shell. That's ecologist Dr. Emma Sayer from the University of Lancaster. So what we're asking for is for the Science Museum to stop taking sponsorship from Shell, to divest from the fossil fuel industry, and to not be using Shell to greenwash and to tarnish the reputation of the Science Museum. So it's pretty clear that that's what we're asking them to do.
Wow. Yeah, look, 100%. You know, and everything you say, and your colleagues behind are saying, and the people outside, like you're all scientists, so you know exactly what you're talking about. Talking to this gentleman down here who's worked in the Arctic, seen firsthand what's going on, and he's terrified, and people are terrified, and the scientific community are terrified. And from what you're saying as well, you know, you sound like you're just terrified, and also disgusted by the fact that like the Science Museum is accepting sponsorship by the very companies that are actually destroying our biosphere.
Exactly. And I'm terrified about what's happening to the planet. And just to clarify, I've spent the last 2 years of my life 100% committed to researching everything that was going on our planet. And the way that I came from a place of actually not believing that it was as bad as all that. I came from a place of, by chance, going along to one of the early Extinction Rebellion protests because I was supporting my partner who was leading the samba band, feeling a little bit embarrassed, saying surely it's not this bad. Surely Extinction Rebellion are kind of over dramatic. They're, you know, exaggerating the situation. It can't be this bad. If it was this bad, then the politicians really would be doing something about it. If it was this bad, then the media would be on the front page of every newspaper. And someone like me who's devoted my life to science communication, to being a scientist myself, I would be, you know, called upon at every opportunity to speak about this stuff. So I made it my mission for the last 2 years since that. So April 2019 was when I went to that first demonstration as a bystander. I made it my mission to really research everything, to read every paper, to read the IPCC reports, to find out from climate scientists and ecologists exactly what's going on, to speak to every expert I could find. And over those last 2 years, I can honestly have good sleep because I'm more terrified the more I've read. And because of that, I've now devoted everything that I now do to raising awareness and to sounding the alarm and to helping people to understand the truth of what's really going on the planet. And part of that has been investigating big oil and the cover-ups from big oil and the corruption of science due to big oil, the lobbying, the think tanks. I mean, it's just horrific. It's exactly the same as what we saw with the tobacco industry. And to have, you know, Shell now sponsoring an exhibition at the Science Museum breaks my heart.
Absolutely. And I've seen your, I think it's 80 or 90 page document that you produced for kind of like science. I was going to say science for dummies, but it really is. It's just kind of, it's a very easy to read, to understand, and to terrify just why scientists like yourself and scientists behind us here are having to take action and just explaining. And when you just see it, you just realize, as you said, politicians are not, you're not doing humanity service. And big oil and gas companies, they wield too much power, and they sponsor people like the Heartland Institute, who you know, they pump in billions into, or millions or tens of millions or hundreds of millions, vast amount of money and propaganda. And that's why people still don't really realize how bad the situation we're in. And I'm just going to mention one thing that terrifies me is just reading about the Arctic death spiral, that by 2034, according to NOAA from the, it's part of the American government, that we're going to have our first blue ocean event, which is a ice-free Arctic, which is going to play havoc on the weather here in the UK and around the world. And it's just absolutely terrifying. You know, it's, yeah.
And you mentioned the shareholders for Shell. I mean, in line with at the same time as the International Energy Agency issued their report yesterday saying we can't have any new oil or gas exploration, which is completely at odds with Shell's plans. Shell's very shareholders, you know, Shell have been spending £1 billion of shareholders' money since the Paris Agreement in lobbying and think tanks against climate action. And Shell shareholders came out yesterday slamming Shell's plans and saying that they are vague commitments that don't do anything. And you're absolutely right. You know, it's terrifying what's going to happen. The document that you mentioned, that myself and other members of the scientists for Extinction a year and a half, we published it back September. It's called Emergency on Planet Earth. It's at 50 pages, but there's lots of summaries, and it's very well broken down by a contents page where you can read about precise impacts that are happening, the weather, food, water, crops, mass migration and what's going to be happening in 2030, 2050, the end of the century, if we don't take radical action now, and what the governments are and aren't doing. And this document, you can find it on the Extinction Rebellion website. You can also find it on our scientistsforxr.earth dedicated website as well. And as you say, you know, what we really wanted to do is just break it down into layman's terms, into things that everyday people can understand. And yes, like, you're right, you know, when people do read that, whether they just dip in and read a little section or read the whole thing, you know, universally, the fact is, you know, this is all fact check, this is all reference, you know, everything has been gone to, like, absolutely fastidiously through primary sources, and we've got a whole host of international experts who've gone through it and fact checked it. And when people read this document and really get present to what's going on, which is what's happened for me over the last few years researching and writing it, then there's absolutely no doubt that we have to take action. We have to take action, drastic action right now. And what our government and governments across the globe are doing is absolutely not enough. And certainly big oil like Shell has no part to play in this. They've already obstructed science huge amounts so far. They've obstructed the transition to green energy, and their plans have been ripped apart in terms of what they're going to be doing going forward. So, you know, we have to stop big oil as a part of that drastic action.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is absolutely fantastic. So I've got some more scientists I'm going to interview now. But before I go, Dr. Grossman, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, for the sake of our children, for the sake of those, you know, small people who are coming through the doors of the Science Museum, who are looking in wonder, as I did, as many scientists did, as many of us did when we were children, for the sake of those children, please, please, can the Science Museum and other institutions across the UK and across the globe, we need you to divest from big oil, we need you to tell the truth, and we need you to act now and do something about these lies, these smoke screens, this greenwashing that's taking place.
Wow, thank you. Thank you very much, and thanks for giving your time today and for all the work that you're doing. And yeah, and I totally recommend anybody watching this to go and Google the information that's being produced, because it's some bite-sized bits of information, and for non-scientist people like myself, you can actually go and you can easily digest and understand the consequences. So thank you very much.
It's called Emergency on Planet Earth. And you can find it either through the Extinction Rebellion website or through my own website. Just Google my name, Dr. Emily Grossman.
Emergency on Planet Earth. Okay. Hopefully, maybe somebody can put that into the chat. If somebody Google that and just put the link into the chat, that'd be great. Or maybe Director Vlad could do that. That'd be great. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. So that was Dr. Emily Grossman, and very powerful words. I'm just going to check in with Director Vlad to see if they want to go outside, or I've got some more scientists here to interview. Yeah. Okay, that's great. So I'm just going to see if this young lady has a moment to speak with me. How you doing? How you doing? So I'm just going to hold it. So what's your name?
My name is Caroline Vincent. I'm a biologist.
Mm-hmm.
I also work as a consultant for the pharmaceutical industry.
Okay, and so you're obviously here motivated enough to come into the Science Museum to lock on, and you can see you're locked on here, and you've got this, you're physically locked on. And so what does this mean to you?
Well, we as a group of scientists, we wrote to Sir Ian Blatchford. Mm-hmm. Telling him what we thought, that it was inappropriate, completely inappropriate for Shell.
And yeah, he's the CEO of the Science Museum?
Yeah, he's the director of the Science Museum, sorry, yes. Yeah. So we wrote to him telling him that we thought it was totally inappropriate for Shell to sponsor this exhibition. Mm-hmm. And we told him the reason why. He answered back, not addressing a single point that we raised. Mm-hmm. So this is when we decided that enough was enough. Mm-hmm. And his reason to let Shell sponsor the museum mm-hmm. is ludicrous, because his argument is companies like Shell are part of the solution. Okay. But what is the evidence? They are still part of the problem. When you look at Shell's 10-year plan, it's not credible. And it's not us, Extinction Rebellion, saying it. It's the financial analyst. Mm-hmm. It's the scientist. Everybody who looked in detail in that plan agree, this is not credible. This is not in line with the Paris Agreement.
So just a 10-year plan. This is Shell's 10-year plan.
This is Shell 10-year plan.
And this is what they presented to the shareholders recently.
That's right. This is what they presented at the AGM, and the plan has been looked at by financial analysts. And I logged on to a financial analyst broadcast the other day. They were about that close to call Shell and Total liars, because what they are presenting is smokescreen, is something. So what they are saying is that yes, it's not in line with the Paris Agreement, but we've got our own plan, and their own plan means burning more fossil fuel, exploring for fossil fuel.
And this is like and these machines here, like direct air capture and these future technologies, relying on technology that hasn't been proven on scale. And it's not costed, and
that's right. So when you look at their business plan, it's full of holes. It's very vague.
Yeah.
So they jump up and down by saying, yes, we will be net zero by 2050. Here's our 10-year plan. We are going to rely on tree planting, and we are willing to rely on carbon capture.
Yeah.
But when you look in detail at the business plan, it's full of holes.
Yeah.
It's not credible. It's so. Which evidence? As the director to tell us that they are part of the solution.
Yeah.
They are not part of the solution. They are very much still part of the problem.
Yeah.
I was saying to a friend 2 days ago, if it looks like a duck, if it swims like a duck, and if it quacks like a duck, well, this is a duck, and a really pretty lame one in the case of Shell, really. And I'm flabbergasted that not more people see this through.
But I don't think one thing is like we got the science, and I was just talking just now with Dr. Emily Grossman, and she said it wasn't until 2 years ago that she realized the actual extent of how bad it was, and she was like, well, why doesn't everybody know about this? And scientists know, and you got your colleagues here, and you're all physically locked on, and you're risking your careers to do this. And you've just said you've just looked at the financial plan, and it just doesn't stack up.
That's right. Yeah. So the question is, which evidence has got the museum has to tell us that Shell is part of the solution? Because where we are standing, they are not part of the solution.
Yeah.
They are still going to. When you look at it, it's mind-boggling. It's they are increasing their gas production. If you look at it and extrapolate it, that means that in 10 years' time they would have doubled their gas production.
Yeah.
I mean, WTF? What the fuck? I'm sorry to use the fuck word.
But it is. Yeah, you couldn't make this up.
Exactly.
You could not make this up.
You couldn't make this up.
Yeah.
So why is the museum defending Shell? Why are they defending the sponsorship? We are in awe of the Science Museum. We love the Science Museum.
Yeah.
We think that the staff is doing so well, that the exhibition is a great way to engage people in something that is really needed to educate people and to engage them in about the solution that we need to adopt. But please don't do it with Shell. Don't do it with fossil fuel. You've got another exhibition down the road, which is also sponsored by fossil fuel.
Yeah.
What? Why? Why on earth? Why are you defending those companies that are using you to greenwash?
It's like a form of colonialism, It's just like we're getting sold as like a lame duck, and it's getting this kind of I said comfort blanket earlier to your colleague. Like this here is just this is absolutely nothing. This is not going to work. Do you know what I mean? It's just like we've already got the solutions that we need right now. And that's to stop all oil and gas, hydrocarbon extraction, stop all cutting peat bog, reform land use, and start reforming soils, stop flying. We know what we need to be doing, right? But if we're going to be relying on future technology that doesn't exist on scale, you know, we're just playing dice with humanity.
You're right, and I think the key word that you use is unscaled, because at the moment we've got no evidence that they work at the scale needed.
Yeah.
Right, and I think that, you know, people like the director of the museum, people like the board of Shell, they should be ashamed of themselves. They should look at themselves in the mirror and ask what they are doing, and project themselves in 10 years' time. What are they going to tell their children and their grandchildren? Well, good luck to them, because this is really criminal.
Yeah.
And I will go as far as saying that, you know, by allowing Shell in this wonderful space, in this space that educates so many kids, in the space that make people want to be scientists, how dare they letting Shell spoil that? How dare they?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting very emotional.
But it is
an insult. It's an insult to the scientific world.
An insult to the scientific world.
Yes, it is. Yeah. It is, and we are devastated as scientists. Devastated.
Yeah.
I cannot put any more words. I'm sorry.
It's okay. No, it's okay. Look. I'll let you. I was going to say let you go. I can't let you go. You're locked on.
You can let me go.
I'll you know. Good talking to you. Anything else you want to add? So I was going to talk to some of your colleagues here.
I think the only thing really to emphasize is the fact that we are not against the Science Museum, and we are not against the staff that work so hard, and the scientists who work so hard to put together this exhibition. We are against the sponsorship, and that's what we want to convey, that the sponsorship is irresponsible, and that's all. But, you know,
And you're a doctor of biology, is it?
Yeah, I've got a PhD in biology, but I also got an MBA from INSEAD, so I can see both sides. I can see the science and I can see the business. So I think I'm very well placed, in fact, to understand both worlds. And to conclude that what Shell is doing doesn't make sense, even from a business perspective. And I think more than that is that they are lying to their shareholders, because that's going to leave people with stranded assets. I mean, you know, if you look at it from a purely business point of view, when you've got only 30% of shareholders who understand that Shell business plan is not credible, it leaves everybody in a precarious position as shareholders. So
stranded assets.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the whole thing's bonkers.
It's whichever way you look at it, you know, even if you say, well, people are supporting Shell because they want to make money, well, let me tell you the news, guys. You're not going to make money, and in the process, you are killing us. So. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I'm just out of words.
No, it's fine. Thank you for explaining that in very, very elegant words. Thank you. So I'm just going to check in with Vlad. Director Vlad, can you hear me? Yeah. I'm just checking time-wise. Yeah, we're free to do. Just in case you're joining us, we're here in the Science Museum in South Kensington, where they have the new exhibition on our future planet of how we're going to save humanity. And the irony is it's actually sponsored by Shell Oil, who are one of the biggest contributors to hydrocarbons, to the putting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere through oil extraction, which obviously humanity uses. But we need to switch rapidly from extracting oil and gas and move into renewables, and just talking to Caroline there, into there's so many different things we can actually be doing. But the way Shell's selling it to us is they're selling future technologies, like these machines here behind me. These are direct air capture and carbon capture and storage machines that are going to be used, they say, to extract carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and use it to then store carbon in the ground, and then we're all safe. So we can continue burning vast amounts of fossil fuels, and we can rely on future technology that's unproven at scale. We don't even know if it's going to work. We don't even know how we're going to pay for it. But what we're doing is we're kicking the can down the road. And then just talking from the scientists here today, they're saying, well, actually, the levels that we're going to be reaching by Paris Agreement, 1.5 degrees, we're rapidly getting towards that point. So we actually haven't got time to be relying on any future technologies, and there's no room for Shell sponsoring an exhibition like this, because it's greenwashing at the worst type of greenwashing. It's actually it's selling lies to humanity. I was going to see if I'm going to have a word with this gentleman here. Hello. Can I just have a quick chat with him?
Yeah, sure.
How you doing? So we're just on a live stream here. Hi. So what's your name?
My name is Pete Knapp.
Pete.
Yes.
And you're a researcher, I believe.
Yeah, I research air quality at Imperial, just next door.
Imperial College London.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, I can't hear you very well. Do you mind? You can take your mask off. I think you're double masked, so I'm just going to hold this towards you.
How's that? Is that
any? You are double masked.
Yeah.
So you do air quality, and you're so worried that you've actually got double masks on.
I've got 3 masks. I've got another one under here.
Do you?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. The reason is I've got one of the blue masks on the inside of this.
Yeah.
Does a really good job at filtering particles.
Yeah.
But the black one just keeps it in place.
Yeah. Can you just take that one off? It's just a bit hard hearing you. So I've never. So we've got an air quality researcher who's actually so worried that he wears multiple masks. So I'm actually even more worried by that now than anything else that I've seen today.
What does he know that I don't know?
I know. Well, we know air quality in London is like killing 10,000 people a year, and
yeah, I'm not sure about the figure on London, but I know that 1 in 5 deaths caused by air pollution from fossil fuel combustion.
Yeah.
And this is a statistic that is pretty shocking, I thought. And I used to work in Beijing as a maths teacher.
Yeah.
When I looked out the window there, you couldn't see the next building some days because there was just so much smog. And I had no appreciation of the scale and magnitude that humans could have on the environment. And that was my first exposure, really, into knowing how big a problem we have as a globe.
Wow. And so you're literally next door in Imperial College.
Yep.
You guys produce amazing reports. You did a lot with the COVID crisis. You're doing a lot with the health crisis. You're doing a lot with obviously like climate science, air quality. And you're now here, and you're physically locked on.
Yeah, I am.
You're physically locked on, and you're jeopardizing, your career and everything by putting yourself on the line. Yeah. What's compelled you to do this?
Well, I think it's a really important step for us scientists to step out of our comfort zones.
Yeah.
There's a big problem in the scientific community about stepping out and speaking up against this stuff. Because Imperial College, there's a real reliance on fossil fuel investment as well. But there's a huge number of barriers among the scientific community to speak out.
Yeah.
Reputation is one of them. Time is another one. There's no real incentive from universities to get people to stand up and speak out. And loads of people know about it.
Yeah.
Loads of people have a real problem with it. But a lot of scientists are really finding it difficult to speak up.
And what do your colleagues, think of you, like, being vocal about this? Because we obviously we need to know, the lay people need to know how terrifying the science is, and then we come to the Science Museum, and the lay person comes and they say, oh, here's a future of the planet exhibition, and we've got Shell sponsoring it, and they're going to have these machines, like this machine behind us, that's going to save us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think when the public coming in here and they're seeing this stuff, they might be thinking, okay, well, solutions are on the way. And hey, look, Shell are helping out. Aren't they a good company? And we call this greenwash because really Shell has been trying to limit the science on this technology and lobbying against legislation that that relates to reducing carbon emissions.
I think we're going to have a word that's actually beyond greenwashing. This is more like kind of genocidal greenwashing, or I can't even think of a phrase.
Yeah, there isn't a phrase for it.
You know what I mean?
It's ecocidal beyond really anything that we've seen before.
Yeah.
Over the past 3 weeks, I've been doing a lot of research on Shell, things I never really knew about, and they've got a lot of mess in their past. And I, before this, was thinking, well, maybe there's a glimmer of hope that Shell, with all of their money and their resources, will be able to do something to fix this.
Yeah.
But really, they're not going to. They're looking at their history and their projections and how much money they're spending on fossil fuel extraction compared to CCS or renewable.
Exactly. Even what they're spending on CCS, which is carbon capture and storage, and what they're spending on renewables, because we got the screen just behind us over here that keeps on showing us this wonderful technology, and they keep on going, and they keep on showing solar panels and wind turbines, right? Which is a form of greenwashing, because for every $1 they spend on renewables, they spend $23 on oil and gas extraction and infrastructure.
That's correct. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, we know what we need to be doing. And I think we've only got like 15% of the world is powered by renewables.
Yeah.
85% is still in hydrocarbons.
Yeah.
They're just playing a little token by giving a little bit here, and then still investing in oil and gas, which is going to kill us.
But then they will say something like, "Well, we can't change overnight."
Mm-hmm.
They'll.
But look what happened with COVID. People said, "Oh,
yeah." But I mean, a big argument against that is that they've had 40 years to think about it, and they haven't. And we know that Shell have been spending such a small fraction on renewable energy, not because of the demand for oil and gas, but because they don't want to change their business model, because it will cripple them financially.
Yeah.
And they just haven't got in there soon enough to change their business to profit from what needs to be done in the future. It's just been too easy and too cheap for them to exploit and extract.
Right. Anything else to add?
Well, in terms of air quality, the burning of fossil fuels is killing a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
People don't make the connection between what comes out of their car and children having asthma or and these connections need to be stronger. My background as an air quality scientist, that connection needs to be stronger, and that's partly why I'm here.
And we're talking about, like, you got these things called PM 2.5s and PM 10s, and then you got your NOx and SOx, which are sulfuric oxides and nitrous oxides. And this is what we breathe all the time in London. So you're just there, all the cars are idling, and this is just getting pumped out, and we're breathing it in, and our kids are getting smaller lungs, and this stuff is literally killing us.
Yeah, I went to a police car and asked them to turn their engine off. They were very upset with me.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing, Pete. Well, look, keep up the good work. Great talking to you. I'd love to talk to you again about air quality, because it's something that we've actually got a local campaign going in Wandsworth about air quality, and I know Bristol's got a big campaign going, and there's a lot of XR groups have campaigns against air quality, and it's all interconnected.
Yeah.
So keep up the good work.
I look forward to having a chat with you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'll give you my details afterwards.
Cheers.
I'm just going to check in with Director Vlad. Do I have time for one more interview? Yeah. Okay, no problem. I think we're going to go outside and see what's happening outside. Oh.
Next, if they are agreeable. I think, let's have a look at that. Frank, can you be loud? Yeah, good man yourself. Okay, so now we have, I think that's about as high as it goes. We have a word from one of the children who are passionate about science, passionate about life, and passionate about this planet. I'll hand you over to Frank. Give him a warm welcome, please, people.
I'm here today because Shell is sponsoring the Science Museum's exhibition, Our Future Planet, about climate change. Shell plays a role in causing the climate crisis, so they should not be paying for an exhibition about it. What is even worse, that Shell has been trying to cover up their part in causing the climate an ecological emergency ever since we found out about it. Shell knew about the climate crisis and they lied. We will not trust the Science Museum anymore if they continue to accept money from Shell. The Science Museum also accepts money from Equinor, which is another fossil fuel company. The exhibition Equinor sponsors is the Wonder Lab, which is aimed at helping kids learn about science. Children go to the Science Museum to learn about the world. How can we learn anything from a company like climate?
Well done, Frank! Good job!
XRU. Okay, it's great to see what's going on outside. So we're back in here, and we're going with Dr. Valeria, who is a doctor of, what are you a doctor of?
Molecular biology.
Yeah. Okay. What does that mean?
So my project is actually studying pregnancy and fetal development.
Mm-hmm.
So the aim of my project is kind of to create a better environment within the mother, so the baby is born healthier. But what's the point of my research if then the future, like the planet where this baby is born,
Right.
will actually collapse? So that's why.
Just hold on one moment. Just going to hold this. I'm just going to show again. You're locked on as well. You got this big huge lock here. Wow. And so you're studying about like a pregnancy. You were saying about the health concerns.
Yeah, exactly. And also we are literally destroying the planet. So I don't see the point of my research in trying to help a baby before it's born if then we don't do anything to help them after they're born.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I found it appalling that Shell is sponsoring this exhibition. It's just because we know it's just a greenwashing tactics. They just want to delay further the actions.
Mm-hmm.
So they are saying, just don't do anything now. We can do it in the future, which is, a really disturbing idea.
Mm.
Also, because if you think about the people in the global south who are already kind of getting to 1.5, you really condemn them to like leave the country, famine, droughts, and kind of creating their homes and making them homes like unlivable places. So we really need to take actions now, and we need to reduce emissions now, and Shell doesn't have a plan to do that. They just still want to keep exploiting with oil. Their plan is to reduce 1 to 2%, which means like 20% by 2030, and they declare they are aligned with the Paris Agreement, but the Paris Agreement says that you need to reduce by 50%, so they are not aligned. And this is only to give like 66% of chances to stay under 1.5, and again, it's ridiculous. Like I don't think anyone would walk on a bridge that has 1/3 chances to fall.
and everyone talks about 1.5. Okay, so. And one of the things is like there's a lot of people who don't really understand like what does that mean, because it just sounds like a number goes 1.5 degrees. Oh, that's not too bad. We could it's a bit cold here in London. We could be a little bit warmer.
Yeah, no, I mean, to be honest, they would say like temperature could go up to like 4 degrees or more, like in summer, like the heat waves. And we've seen heat waves killing like 100,000 people in Europe overall. And yeah, they're just getting more and more frequent. So instead of maybe coming once every, 20 years, it's coming one every other. And then if you keep going, it's going to be every year. I mean, the last year, like the wheat field and wheat hills were like, so we don't realize because we go to the supermarket, but at some point, we are risking that the supermarket won't have food.
So the whole thing is right. So the whole scientific community, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, all the peer-reviewed papers have said we have to limit the temperatures to 1.5 degrees increase, and we're at like 1.1 at the moment. So we're getting dangerously close. And the likes of Shell, their plans is not in the line with even 2 degrees.
Exactly.
So it is greenwashing.
Yeah, it's definitely. And I mean, to be honest, we welcome these exhibitions. Like we need to talk about solutions. We need to talk about the difference between nature-based solution and technological solution, and everything that works. We definitely welcome it. But at the moment, what Shell is sponsoring is just like unrealistic scales. So they want to use this technology at a scale that is not proven it's going to work. So it's really just gambling with the future and just thinking about like leave the job to the future generation to deal with. And like we should stop it. And that's why.
And that's why I'm just gonna walk out so you can actually just see. This is like locked on to a futuristic machine. That's the machine that you're locked onto here. It's a mechanical tree prototype and I don't want to swear because it's during the day, but like honestly, what the hell? Seriously, a mechanical tree.
Yeah.
Next generation model will be sold by the dozen.
Why do
Forming
we need
carbon
trees when
farms.
you can have a mechanical one?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not my area of expertise. Then I said, it's an important discussion, and we are not undermining the message that originally the exhibition wanted to pass.
Yeah.
We know that there were like experts and really like good scientists who've been working on these exhibitions.
Yeah.
And they were also feel betrayed. So that's a big point. Like Dr. Emma Sayer from the University of Lancaster, who was one of the contributors of this exhibition, said that she feels ashamed that her name was associated with Shell.
Yeah.
The same as the student climate networks and all like the school strike people who have also been part of these exhibitions.
Yeah.
So if it was not so controversial as the director of the Science Museum are trying to say, why not revealing the sponsor until the last minute and not telling even the people who participated to making this exhibition happen?
No, absolutely. So, anything else you want to add? I'm just going to go and.
I don't know. We're still hoping that the museum is kind of going to change his mind and realize what needs to be done. This museum is the science museum. It should really inspire the future generation, and the future generation, as I said, feel betrayed.
Yeah.
So it's, I think, in the interest of the museum to cut ties. And other museums have done it already. The National Museum did it, the South Bank Theatre did it, and many others. So is it possible?
So it's possible to do,
Yeah. So.
Amazing. Keep up the good work, Doctor.
Thank you.
And thank you for taking this such a brave action. You know, take care. Bye-bye. So, that was Dr. Valeria, and taking brave action here. I've got two more scientists. These guys scientists? They are scientists everywhere. So I'm just going to hold this towards you, which is a microphone. It's very high-tech way of doing things. So you're Jean, Dr.
Jen, just Jen.
Sorry, Jen. I apologize. Jen, so you're a researcher.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
So what's compelled you to come and take action against the Science Museum?
Stories really matter. So the story you tell really matters, and the story we tell of the climate emergency really matters. And I'm a mum. I came here as a child. I love science. I was inspired by this museum, and I brought my own children here. And by allowing Shell to sponsor this exhibition, the Science Museum are allowing them to co-opt all of the great science and turn it into their story. And it turns them into a benevolent benefactor in the story of the climate emergency. And they aren't that. They are the problem and not the solution.
Yeah. And so you're a researcher, so you kind of understand things.
Not everything.
No, but we see these scientific papers, and we come here, lay people, we walk around this place, and this is a wonderful museum, and we were in awe, and we see the likes of, we see these mechanical trees to suck carbon out of the atmosphere that's going to save us, and you think, well, this is good.
Yeah, and undoubtedly there is some really great science and technology in this exhibition, and our problem here is not with the exhibition in and of itself.
Yeah.
It's with the sponsorship of it and the narrative and how that's being captured by an organisation which is not interested in the radical change we need.
Yeah. And what do your colleagues think of you, doing these kind of things, or your friends and family? Do they support you?
They're broadly supportive. I've got two children, and they're very proud of their mum.
Yeah.
I can't look them in the eye and say that I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
I can't look them in the eye and say I didn't do anything. At least now when I go home, whatever the consequences of today are, I can say to them that I really did try to make sure that the truth was told.
Yeah, and amazing. And so you're a mum, and you're saying you've got this here so people can see why you're standing here.
Yeah, so what's really interesting actually about the way this protest has kind of panned out is we've become part of the exhibition.
Yeah.
So we are exhibits in and of our own right. We're talking to people. We're explaining why we're here. We're explaining why we love the Science Museum, but we absolutely have to call out this sponsorship for what it is.
Yeah, amazing. Anything to add for? Yeah. I put you on the spot here.
Yeah, you put me on the shit. Get Shell out the museum. Cut ties with big oil.
Cut ties with big oil. Very clear, very simple. Thank you very much. Keep up the good work. Did you want to have a quick word? Dr. Abby Perrin? I'm a microbiologist, right? And I'm guessing that's something to do with small things. Small, yes. And that was like some form of biomass that sort of living stuff.
Yes, so I currently work on microbes that photosynthesize.
Yeah. Ooh. So I'm just going to just change my hand around like I'm getting cramped here. So I'm just going to hold this towards you. So you microbes that photosynthesize.
Mm-hmm.
So are these the kind of things like in the ocean that kind of that gives us oxygen?
Yes. So the people debate the numbers, but something like 20-30% of all the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is captured by photosynthetic microbes.
Yeah.
Which are very, very interesting.
So these things here are what we need when we talk about like kind of killing our soil and killing our oceans. We're talking about killing the little tiny things that actually stop, so
they're part of
bigger
a
cycle.
delicate ecosystem, and they play a really important role in taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere.
Wow. Okay, so we've got that out of the way. Phew. There goes my A-level science. So what's compelled you to come and take this action today here?
So I was very, very nervous about coming here today, but I'm more nervous about what the future of the planet looks like if we don't stand up against organisations that are painting themselves to be part of the solution to the climate and ecological emergency, but spend 90% of their resources doing activities that are so much more damaging and are contributing more to the crisis than they are to solving it. Somebody I know calculated that Shell in particular are spending more than 200 times more on extracting oil and gas than they are in actually investing in carbon capture and storage technologies. And most people probably wouldn't know that from their branding.
Wow. No, very good. So you're here and you're just calling them out, and
I feel like we're scientists. Like I want to stand up for good science, and there's a lot that we don't know, but there are a few things that are quite clear. It's quite clear that we are in an emergency situation, and we need to be doing everything we can to change our course. And currently, despite what you might read or might hear from Shell, they are putting us on a very dangerous and very scary course.
It's a very scary course, yeah. Absolutely. Anything else to add?
No, I'm absolutely exhausted, and yeah.
And just one other question: what's the name of those little microbes in the sea that are?
There's lots of different ones, but I work on cyanobacteria.
Cyanobacteria.
Blue-green algae.
Yeah. And algae is really good at extracting carbon dioxide.
Yeah, it's good at doing what it does best, which is concentrating carbon dioxide and using that to photosynthesize and make biological material.
Wow. Amazing. Keep up the good work. Nice talking to you. Thank you very much. So I'm just going to check in with Vlad here. Yeah, no, that's it. So I'm just, I don't know actually if anybody's actually seen what the exhibition looks like. So I'm just going to just pan around and just give you a quick idea what our future planet looks like. So save you £5 from coming in. Actually, I recommend coming into the Science Museum. So this is what the exhibition is. This is one of the Climeworks direct air capture machines of taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and turning it back into rock. We've got different ones here. These are more different wonderful machines about absorbing carbon, deep capture machines. Then we've even got ones here. They're talking about converting carbon dioxide into yoga mats and converting it into cutlery and sunglasses. It all sounds absolutely wonderful. And we've got this nice diagram here showing, what an injection platform looks like of where we're going to be putting carbon dioxide, and it's going to be stored into these rocks here. So some of this stuff is actually technically possible to do. Again, it's unproven at scale. We don't actually know what the costs are going to be, but it's the sheer volume that we actually have to do. It's very complex and it's very expensive. So, and then around here, this is our future, our planet. This is the exhibition. Then around this side here, got tomorrow's world. And we've got some stuff here about green up your act, talking about these are from kids, keep it cool. And yeah, we've got some of the brown stuff here, black stuff, coal, which is obviously causing vast amounts of carbon dioxide. We've got a bit of information here on the forests. So this is a part of the big greenwashing that they're talking about, is the scale of reforestation that Shell are talking about in order to keep on polluting. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. It's a very, very small exhibition, but the whole thing is actually sponsored by Shell. And the two main displays that you've got are these machines, this carbon tree and the carbon capture and storage machine, which everybody's quite terrified about. So I hear we've got Dr. Emily Grossman again. It'd be good to have a quick word before we wrap up. Emily, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I'm here.
There we go. So you've just been listening to some of the interviews with the scientists, your colleagues here. So just some of your thoughts before we wrap up.
Yeah, I'm really, really moved by everything that's been going on today. As you've heard, some of the scientists are really putting their careers on the line. They're very nervous. Some of them are really not used to doing this kind of thing. You know, scientists, as I said earlier, are not generally used to being activists, but we've had to do this because we've been raising the alarm for decades. Most of us know really the depths now of what's going on, and we're not being listened to. And to be at an exhibition or to be witnessing an exhibition from one of the country's top science institutions, if not the top, the Science Museum, being sponsored and funded by Shell is just absolutely heartbreaking. So, you know, we've had to take action. And just to sum up, you know, what is really the problem with Shell? I mean, we're talking about Shell knew about the climate crisis at least 30 years ago, and they've spent, since the Paris Agreement, which has agreed to limit the absolute worst damage of climate change, Shell has spent 1 billion of their shareholders' money in funding climate delay, climate denial, climate misinformation, institutes like the Heartland Institute, spending shareholders' money on basically corrupting science misinformation with the aim specifically to delay taking meaningful action, which is exactly what's happened. And then if we look at what's needed today, Shell are absolutely irresponsibly polluting areas of the world and not cleaning up after themselves, in spite of facing legislative action in places like Nigeria. There's 8 million people each year dying from air pollution. Most of that is due to fossil fuel emissions. But in terms of what's needed to go forward, that's kind of even worse in a way, because Shell are saying that they're getting to net zero 2050, that they've got a 10-year plan, but it's been torn apart by scientists and financial analysts. What we really need to see, it's internationally agreed through the Paris Agreement that we need to stay below 1.5 degrees heating. What that means practically is halving our emissions by 2030 and going to net zero by 2050. But yet Shell are actually only committing to a 20% reduction in their gas emissions, and that's only the intensity of emissions. Out from the International Energy Agency yesterday, saying that in order to get to net zero and in order to stay below 1.5 degrees, which is absolutely essential now, we have to see absolutely no new exploration for fossil fuels, oil or gas after the end of this year. But what Shell are already committed to doing is expanding their gas exploration by 50% over the next 10 years. So it's completely ludicrous. They are not aligned with any international targets. And as you've just been saying, they are basing their future business plans on enormous amounts of carbon capture and storage, which is what you're seeing in the exhibition. But the problem is it is absolutely not proven to be able to work. So they're kicking the can down the road. They're saying we're going to suck out all this carbon dioxide from the atmosphere in future years. We're going to plant all these trees. It's just not feasible. It's just not scientifically possible. And they're putting that responsibility on future generations. And we're already seeing that Shell are actually on trial in The Hague for their actions to delay and to willfully mislead about the climate crisis. They're on trial for that, with the failure to respond to the climate crisis. That's at The Hague. And I just want to mention also one landmark court case that took place not so long ago. There were 7 Extinction Rebellion activists who, in April 2019, as part of one of the early rebellions, actually graffitied on the Shell building and broke glass at the front of the Shell building. And they were put on trial for this. And the jury acquitted them. And why did they acquit them? They acquitted them because each of those 7 activists, they gave an account, a heart-moving account from the heart, from their research into why they felt that it was necessary to attack Shell in this quite, one could say, challenging and controversial way, but the jury decided that there was grounds to acquit them based on the information as to what Shell are actually doing. So even everyday people, non-scientists, when given the right information, when really told what's going on, rather than this smokescreen of greenwashing, are agreeing that we need to get Shell out. So for the Science Museum to be essentially complicit in those lies, to be covering up for Shell, to be basically using their own reputation and integrity to help Shell to continue doing what they're doing, because Shell needs a social license, and they're getting that social license from sponsoring exhibitions like this one. And effectively, by the Science Museum lending their name and their integrity to that, to give them that license, they're essentially complicit in Shell continuing to spread misinformation, continue with profit that is just pushing us towards devastation.
Oh, wow. Well, I think this is a pretty good summary. We're going to be wrapping up now, so I think you've given a very good conclusion. Yeah, and anything else to add before we wrap up?
Just to say that we're here. We're here as scientists. We're here. It's difficult for us to be here. You've heard a lot of the scientists saying that it's difficult for us to take a stand. And to put ourselves on the line and to take a stand and to have our voices heard. We've been taught to be impartial, to not be emotive, to simply report on facts, and it hasn't worked. And it's even more difficult for scientists to be going out there at the Science Museum of all places. But we're doing it for the sake of our children, for the sake of the children on this planet, to say, please don't have kids coming through the doors, being inspired by science, being inspired about an exhibition about the future of our planet, but teaching them by default or by sort of association that Shell can be part of that future, because they absolutely can't. We have to sever all links to not just Shell, but to all fossil fuel companies and big oil.
Wow. Thank you very much, Dr. Emily Grossman. I think that was a very good way to end this live stream. To anybody watching this, just a reminder, can you please share, tag some friends? We need to get the word out, because most people, from talking to the scientists here, are still not getting the message, because we're up against the machine. And as we've just heard there from Dr. Grossman, is the fact that Shell has spent $1 billion on greenwashing, and on propaganda. And this is what we're up against. So please share this. Please talk to misinformation.
Not just greenwashing, but actually spreading climate denial, climate delay. And that's what's so frightening here. If you want to know more about what's going on the planet and about why we're here as what the scientists are now standing behind, then please do read our Emergency on Planet Earth free online guide to the climate and ecological crisis that's in layperson's terms that anyone can understand. It's written for teenagers and adults. You can find that on the Extinction Rebellion website or by Googling Emergency on Planet Earth and my name, if that's helpful.
Yeah, no, please do that. Please go and download it today, read it, talk about it with your friends and family, get the knowledge that you need. So Dr. Emily Grossman, thank you very much again for joining us on this live stream. Keep up the good work, and yeah, we'll no doubt we'll talk again soon. Okay.
Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah, thanks for everything you're doing too. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. So please, if you're at home, just go and Google and download some of the scientific information that's been put together in bite size for people like us who can nice and simply understand what's actually going on and what's compelling scientists here and around the world to take action, and why these scientists here, we've spoken to all of them, hearing their personal stories. They're putting their own reputation on the line from actually doing this, facing arrest, because they just feel like there's nothing left for them to do but to raise the alarm and to tell everybody that what's happening here at the Science Museum is totally unacceptable, and accepting sponsorship by Shell is totally not acceptable in this day and age of the scientific knowledge that's known with the ecological climate emergency. Yeah, so one last reminder, please share this, please get involved. There's loads of different actions happening here in the United Kingdom and around the world. Everybody can get involved, and we need everybody on board in this. Okay, we're going to wrap up, and we've got a video from Dr. Lucy that's been shot before, so we're going to play out on that. So yeah, so we've got a so it was a speech that happened earlier, and to the director of the Science Museum, so written by scientists of Extinction Rebellion. So we're going to end on that and listen to what the scientists have to say. Thank you very much.
Rebellion!
Hello there, everyone. I'm Lucy Hogarth. I'm an astrophysicist, and I'm here today to represent Exos scientists. Like many of you, I also don't want to be here today. I actually have autism, and if you can imagine, this isn't exactly an autistic-friendly environment. But I'm here today, and I'm going to read out a letter that Exos scientists wrote to the Science Museum, to Serian, about why we believe that Shell is a completely inappropriate funder for their new exhibition on climate solutions. As a community of scientists working across many different disciplines, we are passionate about passing on the wonders of science to future generations. Many of us were inspired as children by eye-opening experiences at the Science Museum. We truly believe that it is world-class. One of the most significant and inclusive aspects is that free entry allows access to anyone. In short, we all love the Science Museum. After a year of the pandemic and with 2 major COP summits on the horizon, we are excited to see the museum reopen with a landmark exhibition on the climate emergency and what to do about it. But it is with great disappointment that we see the museum would allow its reputation to be tarnished by allowing this exhibit to be sponsored by Royal Dutch Shell. Despite Shell knowing about climate change for decades, Shell has a long history of spreading cynical misinformation. Shell have funded groups such as the Heartland Institute and the American Legislative Exchange Council that deliberately cast doubt on the science of climate change. They continue to back at least 8 groups that lobby against climate regulation, which they failed to disclose in transparency reports. Since the Paris Agreement, Shell and the 4th largest oil and gas company invested over $1 billion on narrative capture and lobbying. These tactics have been part of an effective campaign to poison climate discourse and delay effective action. Partnering with such a company with such an extensive track record in funding the corruption of science is completely inappropriate for an institution that aims to promote it. Over the course of decades, Shell has been responsible for repeated oil spills and appalling abuses of human rights. In the Niger Delta, they have contaminated the land and groundwater in a region home to 1 million people. Despite legal action that continues to this day, Shell has largely avoided cleaning up after itself. Shell are making a mockery of existing international regulation by recording 40% of their total profits in tax havens. Given this track record, why on earth would we expect them to clean their CO2 pollution out of our atmosphere? Shell plans to maintain considerable production of oil and increase production of natural gas by 20% in the coming decades. In all of their scenarios, burning of fossil fuels continues through the 21st century. Between 2018 and 2020, Shell invested over 90% of their capital in fossil fuels, with only 3 to 5% in renewable energy. The Transition Pathway Initiative, of which the Science Museum Group is a member, reported that Shell's business plans are not in line with limiting warming to 2 degrees Celsius. Shell's willful failure to respond to the climate crisis is currently the subject of a trial at The Hague. The plans for net zero that Shell have loudly publicised rely on unfeasible levels of offsetting and carbon capture and storage, requiring vast acres for biofuel growth that would compete with land needed for food production and natural ecosystems. A recent open letter by 41 eminent environmental scientists documenting myths around offsetting and net zero targets say that such plans distract from the urgent need to cut fossil fuel emissions now. The over-reliance on currently unproven future mass deployment of bioenergy, CCS, to offset today's emissions sets up a high-stakes gamble for the children coming through the doors of the Science Museum. We find ourselves still in 2021 contesting the integrity of a Shell-sponsored exhibition about the climate crisis, which emphasises the role of CCS, that's carbon capture and storage. While we welcome a balanced discussion of CCS, Shell has a clear vested interest in it being promoted over other measures to mitigate emissions. We strongly reject the premise that Shell are aligning themselves with a transition away from fossil fuels. The utter failure of governments and corporate interests to reverse destructive impacts on the planet's survival systems threatens our civilization and much of life on Earth. Shell continues to play a role in this escalating crisis, but it is clear that their business depends on a societal license to operate. Funding exhibitions allow Shells to borrow the prestige and implied endorsement of the Science Museum Group. This comes at a cost to the Science Museum Group's own credibility. The group's ethical policy says it must not accept funding that harms its reputation or integrity. As previously occurred with toxic tobacco companies, public mood is shifting on fossil fuels. Extinction Rebellion activists who targeted Shell were recently acquitted by a jury on moral grounds. The UK Youth Climate Strike Network feel betrayed by having their materials used in the exhibition without being told of the sponsors, and are boycotting in response. Surely taking this dirty money is not worth the long-term reputational damage. Leading cultural institutions have realised that given the urgency of the climate emergency, it is now completely unacceptable to be associated with the very companies that have fought to delay climate action for decades. In the Netherlands, the Museum Science and Culture Museum, as well as the Van Gogh Museum and other museums as well, have cut their ties with Shell. In London, we have seen the South Bank Centre, the BFI, the National Theatre do the same. The Natural History Museum has gone further by making it their core mission to create advocates for the planet. For the Science Museum to be lagging and not leading on such crucial matters is shameful. The pandemic has borne innovative curation, inspiring our collective imagination as we visited from our phones and laptops. But as the museum doors reopen, this sponsorship feels like a retrograde move out of step with a changed public mood. We humbly suggest that an institution as renowned and inventive as the Science Museum can aspire to more than simply declining to partner with corrupt and ecocidal companies. Our society urgently needs a new story. We must recognise that our collective well-being comes from our communities and from the natural environment. We are passionate about the role that science and scientific method can play. Museums exist to tell stories, and the Science Museum Group tells many that are beautiful and powerful. But the story or partnership which Shell tells us is an ugly one of power, manipulation, and corruption. It is urgent that you do the right thing and cut all ties to big oil now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucy.